All right, welcome again. This is Garrett Duquesne. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Community Development and Conservation. I'm the Planning Commissioner for the town of Greenburgh. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate everyone that's here in attendance. I know there's many watching on live stream and on cable access, and also we appreciate everyone that's here on Zoom. I really appreciate our town board members who are here. I want to acknowledge Supervisor Paul Feiner, Councilwoman Ellen Hendricks, Councilwoman Gina Jackson, Councilman Francis Sheehan. Not in attendance, Councilman Ken Jones. I want to acknowledge his support, as the whole town board has been supportive of this whole process in reimagining East Hartsdale Avenue as a safer space. What we're here for tonight is to talk and hear about the planned improvements of East Hartsdale Avenue and West Hartsdale Avenue that are attributed to a grant that the town received in 2021. What I'd like to do, though, is set the stage with a bit of timeline, just to let you know how we got to this point. Back in 2018, we had a collaborative process where residents reached out to the town board and expressed a desire to sort of take a fresh look at the Four Corners corridor and see from a land use perspective if there could be a higher and better long-term plan for the corridor. And what that process evolved into was a land use document that was adopted by the town board, and it's a supplement to the comprehensive plan. And what it does is it envisions Four Corners as a mixed-use, vibrant downtown node in the town of Greenburgh. And that was adopted in 2019 with broad community support. And what that compelled was the town to follow up with looking at the stormwater and traffic infrastructure in the area. And the town board authorized the services of a professional planning and engineering consultant. And what we did in the years 2020 through 2021, we worked with AKRF, who took a comprehensive look at the traffic network and, again, the flooding issues along East Hartsdale Avenue. And the work that they did conceptualized two major improvement concepts along East Hartsdale Avenue. And those were the concept of an adaptive traffic control system, which was a series of redesigned and newly implemented traffic signals from Four Corners to the Hartsdale Train Station. And then AKRF envisioned a series of pedestrian enhancements from Four Corners, again, to the train station at the key intersections in that span. And what that study led to, which we did have public presentations in the year 2021, was a comprehensive report. And what happened is in 2021, the federal government announced what's called the Transportation Alternatives Program, and the town of Greenburgh applied for that. And I believe that the work that AKRF did in sort of conceptualizing improvements along East Hartsdale Avenue really painted a picture of how we should approach that grant process. And we utilized that study to apply for the federal funding. And we also combined that with the concept for the longstanding need for a sidewalk up West Hartsdale Avenue. And with those three elements, we applied for a TAP grant, and we, as the town of Greenburgh, were successful in obtaining a $5 million grant in September 2021. It's the largest grant you can get under that program. And since that time, we were awarded the grant about 9 months later, and the process is such that you go out and you hire a civil engineer to help design the project that you applied for. And in 2022, we hired Barton LaJudas, our professionals that are here tonight. They actually were able to use the services of AKRF once again as a sub, so it was a good collaborative, cohesive process. And all of this year, they've been really taking a look at the conceptual plans that I just described and have, conducted surveys and really done the work to actually get this project towards shovel ready. And we are in an early stage. So what we're going to hear tonight is where they're at, an update on the improvements. And the format of tonight is such that we're going to present East Hartsdale Avenue as a concept, and we're going to take a break and hear comments from residents that are here and on Zoom. And we're going to answer those questions to the best of our ability, and you can raise comments, questions, whatever you prefer. And then following that, we're going to go into West Hartsdale Avenue, discuss the sidewalk, and then take a break and take questions on that. So that's the format. I really thank everyone for being here, and what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Peter Cristiano of B&L. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen here so everyone at home can see and also in person. So as Garrett said, all right, it should be coming up now. So this is the East-West Hartsdale Avenue Corridor Pedestrian Improvement Project, pin 876290. So Garrett did a great job of doing introductions. To date, we've worked with the supervisor and Garrett and also members of the town board, police department, fire department. So we've had some involvement with just about everyone so far in the town. Some brief introductions of ourselves. I'm Pete Cristiano. I have Tom Baird here from B&L. We also have our sub AKRF. So Mike and Marissa and Elaine, as Garrett said, has had a pretty big involvement so far with the project to date. You know, and then we hired them as a sub, as the sponsor, as the lead on this project for B&L. You know, we're involved with the project management of AKRF, all of our other subs, including our survey sub, civil tech engineering, and our role is public outreach, you know, right-of-way acquisitions and easements wherever those may be needed, and then eventually construction and the inspection services. So a brief agenda. We're just going to kind of run through the purpose, you know, objectives, what our project limits are, you know, where we are to date with the timeline, and go into some existing data and also our alternatives, and then open it up to some Q&A. The PDF of this slide deck will be available for distribution if need be, but it is on the website and being broadcasted right now, so everyone is able to see that in real time. So why are we here? Basically to discuss the project, obviously, kind of get into the history, which Garrett did a great job of, so I'm not going to reiterate any of that, but go over some of the existing conditions that our team has collected so far, you know, what we found out with our survey and environmental, cultural resources investigations. Obviously talk about the alternatives throughout the corridor on East and West Hartsdale, and then mainly receive some public input from everyone, and then what kind of improvements we can do throughout the rest of the corridor. So right now the corridor is vehicle centric. I think everyone knows that. You know, there's a lot of speeding, a lot of vehicles. Want to make some improvements that make it more conducive for pedestrian travel, provide some quality of life benefits that everyone could benefit from by reducing the number of vehicle trips, potentially having people give people the opportunity to not get in their vehicle and to walk, you know, reduce those shorter trips, and then also make sure that this will complement the transit-oriented design that's currently in the town. I know there's the Hartsdale Train Station, there's the bus routes. We want to make sure that whatever we do is going to benefit and complement those existing services. So ultimately our goal is to improve safety and improve traffic flow with what we're planning here. So where are our project limits? East Hartsdale, from Aqueduct to the Four Corners, and then West Hartsdale from the Four Corners to Pat Capone Road. At Pat Capone, there's 3 schools up there. There's existing sidewalk infrastructure that we want to connect from Pat Capone down to the Four Corners. Obviously, there's existing sidewalk infrastructure along East Hartsdale, so we want to improve that. So there are some deficiencies I'm sure everyone has seen out there. Maybe it's detectable warning units at the crosswalks, maybe the striping's not there, signage. We do know there are some longer crosswalk lengths right now. Our goal is to reduce those. The less we can have people exposed to traffic out in the middle of the road, the better. Pedestrian traffic signal infrastructure is a big component on the East Hartsdale side. And I'll have Mike and Elaine talk a little bit more about the adaptive, which would improve the movement of vehicles through the corridor. And then more West Hartsdale is providing that continuous connection from those known pedestrian routes or infrastructure that we already have. So Garrett did a great job of kind of explaining our timeline to date. I'm not going to go back too much into that. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen kind of what's been done. We got on, B&L was on board, in 2022, and since then we've conducted detailed ground survey. Civil Tech Engineering, our sub, has gone out. You may have seen them in the December, January, February timeframe. So they were doing a detailed ground survey, collecting, all of the topographical information, highway boundary lines, detailed meets and bounds survey, collection of utilities. We had ground penetrating radar, a process that allowed us to see basically what underground infrastructure is there without digging it up. So more in the springtime, our environmental team was out there. We did a couple site visits. They've done some desktop surveys, fish and wildlife, and put together reports related to the wetland, the birds, the bees, kind of all of that information. Obviously tonight we're here, October public information meeting, and then the blue text is kind of what we have in front of us, with our preliminary design, some milestone submissions that are coming up, with ultimately construction anticipated in the 2025 timeframe.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You're going to be giving us a hard copy of this also?
Right. I can provide.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Could you just go back to the previous slide? Because some people think that we haven't done anything and we're only doing something in response to a recent death on the avenue. Could you go back to the grayed out area as well to show when did we start working on this and what has happened? In other words, you passed over 2019. This is not something that happened overnight.
Correct. Our teammates, AKRF, was part of the East Hartsdale pedestrian and traffic improvement study, and that was they started gathering data in the 2019 fall 2019 timeframe. During COVID, things maybe slowed down a little bit, but they ultimately provided their findings in June 2021, and ultimately helped the town with a grant application for this project. And from there, that's where the town was awarded the TAP funding, proceeded to work with the DOT on contracts, and ultimately the consultant selection process was last fall in November 2022. I don't know, that kind of discuss a little bit there.
Thank you.
And it's been a few weeks since you submitted the draft, your draft presentation to Garrett Kane, correct? So it was at about the same time or just before the accident, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, quite before. They've been sharing ideas and coming to us. We involved the police department, the fire district very early on. So we're actually almost from the start of their process. We looped in a number of professionals. So it's been ongoing all this year.
You have a microphone?
The federal process requires all of this type of involvement with the project. So the public participation, all of the investigation for the environmental, cultural resources, all of this is documented in a design approval report. So coordination with NEPA, it's a National Environmental Policy Act, that makes sure you're doing all of the requirements to receive the federal reimbursement. So we can't skip any of that because the town would not be able to get reimbursed for their federal grant. Seeker, like I said before, threatened endangered species. We have a team that goes out and they do their desktop surveys, their site surveys, and they all document this in reports that's ultimately compiled in that design approval document that's submitted to the DOT and ultimately the New York State Department of Transportation, and ultimately the Federal Highway Administration, reviews that and checks off that we've done all of our due diligence and is able to move to the next step. We can't move past preliminary design until we do all of this documentation and they agree with what we have. So as Garrett said, there's a $5 million grant from the Transportation Alternatives Program. The town committed, I think it was 2021, as part of their town share. So I have that broken down, $2.3 million, give or take. You can see the breakdown roughly of the design fee, what we anticipate for right-of-way acquisition, incidental phases, and ultimately construction, and the required inspection that's needed for the federal, as part of the federal process.
I'm confused. I see 7.0 million. The TAP grant was 5 million.
Yep.
I thought the town's share is based on the 5 million. Now you're adding 2 million to 5 million. Is that correct? So it's really a $7 million project.
It is, there's an 80-20 breakdown. So the maximum amount for the TAP grant is $5 million. So the town is on the hook for 20% of that. So
20% of what?
$5 million.
So that comes out to 2 million. Oh, right?
Excuse me one second. Yeah, this is Tom from Barton LaJudas. So it's an 80-20 split, and the $5 million includes a $1 million contribution from the town on that for the 20%. The project will cost a little bit more than $5 million, so the town is paying the additional funding because the maximum cap on the funding is $5 million. But we can break that down a little bit more for you later on in the question and answers towards the end.
And if I'm not
On this
mistaken,
slide, though, it says we have a $5 million grant, the town pays 1 million in addition to the 5 million, or 1 million up?
Yeah, I can take this question, but we do want to hold questions till the end. Ultimately, the town is matching 2.3 with, it's a $7.3 million project. 5 million from the federal government, 2.3 from the town.
and if I'm not mistaken, because by the time construction, we're not locked into any contracts yet, correct?
Correct.
And that number can go up or down, depending on whatever construction costs are at the time that the project is awarded, within what?
In general, we have
Few
quite a long
percent.
program, so if we can hold our questions till the end, that would be appreciated.
Including the town board?
Continue.
So I think I'm going to pass it over to Elaine from AKRF to discuss some of the traffic signal.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elaine Dew from AKRF. I want to take it back a little bit to what Pete spoke about. This is about improving pedestrian safety, but also improving traffic flow. So as part of this project, we want to remove the partial signal at Lewis Avenue, and that is signalized only if you're going toward Four Corners, so in the westbound/northbound direction. We want to take that out and instead install a new traffic signal at Rockledge Road, the northern side of Rockledge Road, which you can see right here. As part of this, we're going to be upgrading the traffic signal equipment. There is communication between the signals right now, but these will be upgraded. We'll also be upgrading the sensors and everything, so we avoid things like false calls from parked vehicles. Like we know right by the garage, the train station garage, there are trucks parked out there that call traffic signals the entire day, and that's been a frustration, so it'll avoid that. We'll also, most importantly, be installing ATCS, Adaptive Traffic Control Systems. And so ATCS, you also know this as smart signals. Sorry. Okay. Moving back just one second. So you can see in our graphic here, we're taking out that signal at Lewis, moving that south to Rockledge so that we have more even spacing, so that traffic is able to flow a little better, and that by moving these traffic signals, we're normalizing traffic. So in terms of smart signals, or ATCS are based on sensors. So what they do is they adjust the traffic signals in real time. They'll sense that a car is there, they'll sense how many cars are there, and they'll change the amount of green time so that they're serving people at the intersection. And this helps because, for example, if you're going down to the train station, you'll be able to hit fewer reds because the traffic signal will know that you're there and it'll better serve you. So what it does is it minimizes delays, it reduces the number of times you're stopping on East Hartsdale, and it also decreases your overall travel time. And I'll now pass it over to Mike, my colleague Mike, to go through some of the designs starting at the train station at Aqueduct.
Thanks, Elaine. So one of the things, obviously, that's important in each of these intersections to improve pedestrian safety. You'll see a lot of the similar design elements, because really what we're trying to do is kind of three key things. Slow down vehicles, provide more space for pedestrians through hardscapes, we think of sidewalks, and then we want to reduce the amount of exposure between a vehicle and a pedestrian. A lot of times that's done through shortening the crosswalk. And as we go through these, you'll see where we shorten those crosswalks provides better visibility and the peds in the roadway for a short amount of time. So I'm going to start at Aqueduct Road and go up towards Four Corners. The things I'll point out, let's get my mouse going. One thing is, from what we've heard, is today, this area of Aqueduct Road is currently just striped. And a lot of times you see a lot of weaving of vehicles trying to get over back and forth, which is causing a lot of congestion, lots of pedestrians in the area. So when we were talking with the police department, we are having a concept of creating actually a raised island. Therefore, it prevents vehicles from jockeying for position as they come up to East Hartsdale. As part of that, the island here today for pedestrians is pretty small with a lot of pavement that isn't really used for vehicles. It's just like an open space area. So this island in pink that you see is an expanded island of what's out there today. So now there's more space for pedestrians to queue up in the area versus today. And if I were to take my mouse, today's island is only this small section right here. So that's been greatly expanded. And then the other part is shortening the crosswalks. And here's where you're going to hear the term a curb pedestrian bulb out. If you look on this side of the road, you see the sidewalk bulbs out into the roadway. What that does is my crossing distance has been shortened by almost 8 feet. And if you imagine parked vehicles along the roadway, the problem with parked vehicles is when pedestrians back on the sidewalk, they don't see the cars don't see them. The pedestrian now is further out into the roadway, that now cars see them, they see vehicles, shorter distance, so overall the intersection operates in a safer way. And so as we go through these, you're going to see that come up quite a bit. At Rockledge Road South, this is probably where we have more of our drastic improvements. A couple things to note today is that along Rockledge Road, we have an extremely long crosswalk that also conflicts with what I call a high-speed right turn. There is no crosswalk today on East Hartsdale Avenue. And this is the area where sometimes you'll get some false calls. So what we've done is we've expanded the curb bulb out into the corners to shorten the crossings. So you can imagine now, shorter crossing, shorter crossing, shorter crossing. By creating this bulb out, this right turn, which was a high-speed right turn, is now a more slower right turn speed. And we've tightened up the intersection to now allow a new crosswalk. So now we have crosswalks on all 4 approaches. To get this to work, this is probably one of the biggest changes. Rockledge Road today in this section is a two-way roadway. You could go up Rockledge Road or you could go down Rockledge Road. By making it one way, we help this signal improve because it's one less approach for vehicles to handle, but we can now make this a tighter space so it's a shorter pedestrian crossing. So what does that mean in terms of like the larger neighborhood? Today, from East Hartsdale to this private road, it's two-way. We would make this one way, and then the rest of the system, as it is today, is one way. So for the few vehicles that are parked here that typically would have been able to go out to East Hartsdale, they would have to go around Rockledge Road to a new signal that would be placed at Rockledge Road North. Typically, you wouldn't meet the requirements for a signal there. As we shift the vehicles from Rockledge Road South to Rockledge Road North, you meet a signal warrant. So a signal can be placed there, a brand new signal for pedestrian crossing, which I'll show you in a second. But you can see how this one small change could actually have a pretty large impact to this intersection. As we continue up, we just talked about Rockledge Road North. This would be the new signal. Again, you'll see similar elements, the pedestrian bulb out, shortening the crossing, getting the pedestrians past the parking lane. And again, cars that were coming out on Rockledge South would come out Rockledge Road North with a signalized intersection so pedestrians have a signalized crossing. And again, a shorter crosswalk. So with that, I'm going to turn over to P to continue talking up the corridor as we go to Four Corners.
Thanks, Mike. So continuing up the corridor, so Lewis and Catterson. Right now, there's an existing signal there that would be removed as part of this project that Elaine mentioned earlier. So it would be converted to a mid-block crossing with a bulb out, as Mike discussed. So that positions the pedestrians, farther out into the intersection that they're able to be seen and also see vehicles. So there are some options with the mid-block crossings. I know there is currently a mid-block crossing on East Hartsdale right now with the RRFB, so the rapid red flashing beacon. So that is an alternative that could be employed here. I'll show a couple other examples in a second, but basically, you're improving the curb ramps at each of these locations and making those more conducive for pedestrian movement. So back to the mid-block crossing. So there are some alternatives. The shark's teeth that are shown here are basically yield lines, show where vehicles would need to yield to pedestrians, when a button is pushed with flashing lights that would indicate to the motorist that there's pedestrians that want to cross the street. Continuing with that is the RRFB right here. There's also a hawk signal, pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is a little more involved. But so basically, there's examples that we're showing here that will be investigated further, and we want the public's input on these to really come up with the best solution that fits everyone. Continuing up the corridor to Columbia. Right now, it's a wide expanse of pavement on Columbia. So to reduce that crossing length, we're introducing a median island. It'd be stamped concrete or something more decorative. So basically, you're reducing that crosswalk length. We've got bulb outs on the west side, on both sides of the intersection. You're still allowing for deliveries and vehicles to make drop-offs for people. We're not impacting parking. On the right-hand side where I have my mouse, you can see a vehicle parked in that location. We would move that spot so we would have a net no decrease in parking loss. On the side street down on the bottom part of the page, we looked at vehicle turning movements and garbage trucks and the fire department vehicles. We reached out to the fire department and got their vehicle lengths and how those vehicles maneuver around curves, and we modeled that through this intersection here to make sure that positioning of this island wouldn't impact their access to existing infrastructure. And also in this location, the new signal would be included. So, sure.
One last thing, just because when we get out there, other thing that was really key to note with this bulb out, today, when a vehicle wants to take a left, they will try to jump as quickly as they can in front of the oncoming traffic because it's wide enough to do it. That's a high-speed turn movement. By having this here, you force a vehicle to actually drive straight and then take a slower left. So not only is it safe for pedestrians, but it's safer for the vehicle that was trying to beat the through movement because today there's plenty of pavement to cut across. So that's why this is a pretty big deal to have for pedestrian safety and clean up that. I'm going to leap the queue real quick. So let's make sure. Sorry.
Appreciate that. So continuing to the last intersection on East Hartsdale before the Four Corners is Wilson. Right now, we're just showing, improve striping for crosswalks, and at the southeastern corner of the intersection, a new curb ramp. We have received some public comment in this location related to crossings. You can see with my mouse on the screen, kind of in this direction. So we will continue looking at this location to see how it fits potentially with a mid-block crossing. We do have a lot of pavement to cross in this location, so that is definitely a consideration before we make a decision on something like that. So in addition to all of that, other pedestrian safety elements that we could employ elsewhere in this corridor, are safety bollards, and those could be more decorative looking, but also functional. Security planters, which could be an option as well, which, adds beautification to the corridor. I know street lighting came up at a recent discussion. So it could be low-level lighting or something more aerial, like attached on poles. So those are a few things that, we're still considering at this stage. So at this point, I think we'll open it up maybe to...
Yeah, I just had one question, either Michael or Elaine or anyone. Could you just touch on the adaptive traffic control system and what that does in terms of either grade level service or percentages of projected better flow, and how that influences driver aggression?
So in terms of reduction in delay and improvements in traffic, we can't say for certain exactly a percentage, but we've seen ranges from 5-10% to 50% or more in some cases, depending on the existing conditions. At East Hartsdale Avenue, unfortunately, the coordination of each traffic signal has drifted over time, so right now we know it's not great. So with the improvements, we expect to see some pretty good improvements along East Hartsdale. And because travel time along the corridor will be reduced, it means that drivers will be less frustrated when they're stuck at a red and less likely to try to speed down the corridor to get down to the train station. Instead, you'll be able to go through each intersection at 25 miles per hour at the speed limit and get down to the train station, likely with hitting as very few reds or maybe even no reds. But overall, it helps with pedestrian safety, not only just reducing driver aggression, but by moving our traffic, by adding a new traffic signal at North Rockledge Road, we allow pedestrians to have more crossing opportunities.
And the only thing I'll add is we've had a lot of coordination with State DOT. So while we're only showing the signals and just showing the presentation, these will be tied into the four-corner signal. So this operates as a system, so even though we're not talking about it right now, that signal is part of this system. DOT is on board with it, and that's why we're going to reduce some of that driver frustration at that signal. People are trying to skip the queue to take the left. The ATCS system is going to reduce that queuing and delay right there. But State DOT, we've had multiple meetings with them. They're on board with it, so just this is part of the whole corridor package, not just ending at Columbia.
Yesterday, the town board passed a resolution asking the state legislature to authorize red light cameras. Do you feel that if we do the red light cameras in conjunction with this, that it could also help, address some of the safety concerns that people have?
Absolutely. And I believe also as part of it too, besides just the red light cameras, these have the ability to also have preemption. So if an emergency vehicle needs to get down the street, the capabilities are there to now give emergency vehicles that preemption. So these signals, the technology is advancing very quickly. But with that, with the cameras, the preemption, and the ATCS, which are the smart signals, the corridor should function a lot better.
It's really a package.
It's a nice package corridor, and they've been deployed a lot of places that with great success. So this is not something it's new technology, but it's not the first time it's ever been deployed. So we have a bunch of places in New York State. DOT loves it, so it's working out pretty well.
And, I had a conversation with Garrett about a week or so ago. We originally were planning to do the implementation of this in 2025, and, we were talking about, especially in light of the tragedy that happened, a couple of weeks ago, to see if we could move it up to 2020, do you feel that it's possible, if after you get input, that, this could happen sooner rather than later?
We're certainly going to do everything we can to move up the timeline. One of the constraints with the type of funding that it has is there's a lot of review, and the review from New York State DOT and then the federal highways as well. And a lot of the processes that we have to go through are not able to be run parallel to increase the efficiency. They're more linear, where we have to get through one portion to start the next one. But we are definitely on board and are going to be moving this as fast as we can through the process.
Do you think there's any possibility that it could be delayed to after 2025? I know the Hillside Avenue sidewalk and Central Avenue sidewalk, it took, both were delayed, a year or two.
One of the things that typically is what causes some of that delay is the acquisition of property. And there's some strips through the corridor. What we're doing right now is trying to eliminate every one that we can and minimize any kind of impacts that are major to properties to try to reduce the schedule on the property acquisition phase. We also have to be cognizant of trying to get the projects out to bid. The best time typically is in the late fall, early winter, try to be before Christmas. And sometimes, we delay sometimes to get that good season for construction bids, because the costs really can be very, very greatly if you put it out to bid in June versus you put it out to bid in November. So, but to answer your question, we're going to do everything we can to expedite and speed the process up. And that includes a meeting we had with DOT today on how to streamline the right-of-way. We met in Poughkeepsie earlier today, working out a strategy to streamline the process of right-of-way acquisition. So that's part of the whole entire package. So we'll have a really good idea on where the schedule's going to be, probably in the late winter, probably February or so. We'll have a better take on how that will play out with the schedule. So.
How much pedestrian traffic is there at rush hour heading towards the train station in a way? Because, I'm trying to conceptualize how you'll keep the traffic flowing at rush hour with the lights synchronized and still enable pedestrian traffic crossing across East Hartsdale Ave. So I just need more of a picture of that.
And so this is where, when you shorten crosswalks, we talk about that exposure.
Correct.
The other thing that happens is the crosswalk today, when you're out there, you must provide that amount of time for pedestrian to cross. When that pedestrian's crossing, even if there's no vehicles using that side street, they still have a red light on the main line because pedestrian's crossing. When you shorten that crosswalk, it means less time is needed for the pedestrian, which means you give the time back to the vehicles. So this is where you don't have to decide, we're going to hurt peds or help vehicles. By shortening that, actually helps the system as a whole. And then through the ATCS, it's real time in terms of it is constantly monitoring traffic. So the hard part about this corridor and why you can't use standard signals is the train station has these microbursts. So a timing plan that works for 45 minutes may not work for the 5 minutes when people are leaving, and that's when people are experiencing this delay. So by having the system be able to quickly adapt to that vehicle transition, shorter crosswalks for pedestrians, and more space for them to wait, the system starts working a little bit better. But that's why those shorter crosswalks really even helps vehicle times, because you could allocate that time better.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, logical. And how many parking, you made mention in one instance that there's no loss of parking, but throughout the entire street parking, what would the loss in parking, if any, be?
Do we have the final count yet on parking? I know a Rockledge, I think one of the spaces may have to go away for that.
We're looking at 2 or 3.
I don't think there were any really.
One,
if
two?
any, it may be one, but
Let's
it's
say
just
2 for tonight.
reallocated in another spot. So,
Okay, and then even once you make Rockledge one way, you've got those parking spaces there that will now no longer.
No, the parking spaces on, do you want to go back to the presentation?
I think maybe she might be referencing the. So the parking that is up in here would remain
Remain.
unchanged. So
Oh,
people would still have access from East Hartsdale to get to those spots. You can actually see them right here in this picture. There's about
Right.
15, 20 of them. Those
Yeah.
would remain.
And then we did talk to the fire department. While vehicles will not be using this space to come down, we probably won't close it off as a paved area, probably some striped. That way emergency vehicles could still access this area. So we had a long conversation with them. Given the turn radius come in here, they still want to be able to come down from the other side of Rockledge. So while vehicles can't do it, it'd be done in a way where an emergency vehicle could go in that direction.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think a microphone would be good.
There are three areas that trouble me. One, the cost. This is a $7 million project solely because you've added up the expenses that are $7 million. Now, math is not my forte, but were the town to be paying 20% of the total project, $7 million, 10% is 700,000, 20% is $1.4 million. So I'm wondering why we're paying $2.3 million.
Okay, I can address that question. Thanks for the question. What we did was identify the three major components that we wanted to achieve through this grant, and we worked backwards. We identified what those projected costs would be, and we arose at a cost of roughly $7.3 million. Therefore, the town had to show a match of more than 20% so that we could identify that this was a viable project. If we had to be confined to a certain number, say 500 or 5.8 million or 6 million, then ultimately we would have had to have eliminated some aspect of the project to represent that we had a viable program. But it was identified that all three of these components were so important in tandem that ultimately, and I praise the town board for the support, that we're going to go after it. Having said that, I'm always mindful of potential for other funding. There's nothing to say we can't work with other funding sources to bring more money to the table, if you will. And I can assure you I will be actively on that.
Well, of course, from that respect, we are running out of time because Mr. Feiner wants the project completed in 2024. So you're running out of time to get extra money there. Now, the Rockledge exit, it's two-way right now, correct? Well, the assumption is that the traffic that leaves...
For a small portion, it's correct.
...leaves will be making a left turn. And the other, closer to Central Avenue exit from the property, will be making a right turn. Now, you have all of the traffic that's exiting from that development, leaving through one exit, making both right and left turns, because some of the people aren't going to go towards Central Avenue, particularly those, this is a horseshoe-shaped project, so those who are in the further portion of the curve, are not going to be going backwards. What you are now doing by closing off the existing exit, which you don't want anymore for two-way traffic, is moving the traffic further up the road and creating a hazard at that location. You're moving from one pocket to the other pocket. You're not changing things around. You have carefully brought to our attention all the various changes in the streetlight timings. Fine. None of that has to do with pedestrian safety. It has to do with moving traffic more quickly. The fastest way to move traffic more quickly from the train station, either direction, to Central Avenue is to have no lights at all. But that's not the objective, is it? So why are we looking to move traffic faster along East Hartsdale Avenue when everything it seems to point to, traffic which moves faster becomes more of a pedestrian hazard? You've ended this presentation at Central Avenue and told us, oh, the DOT at Central Avenue is very happy and going along with all this. I really kind of doubt that, because traffic on Central Avenue is greater than traffic on East Hartsdale Avenue and West Hartsdale Avenue. We know that matter can't occupy the same space at the same time. So if you're getting all the traffic from the train station to Central Avenue more expeditiously, fine, even if it isn't a safety measure. It's going to have to stay now at the light to enter Central Avenue. If you have a longer green light at Central Avenue, then the traffic which exists on Central Avenue will now have to wait longer. It's not going to go away. It will have to wait longer. And since I suspect there's more traffic heading in both directions on Central Avenue, DOT is not going to go along with that, as well as the fact that you have left turn lanes, which add to additional time. So all you're doing by here is moving the traffic faster to Central Avenue, but it's going to linger there because the DOT is still going to favor Central Avenue traffic.
So I can
Thanks,
take.
Mr. Samus. Yeah, would you
Oh,
like to address?
yes, I can take your questions. I believe were 4 separate questions in there, but I'll start with Central Avenue first. So Central Avenue, Four Corners, is going to be under the adaptive traffic signal control, and it'll be synced up with all of East Hartsdale Avenue. So as an adaptive traffic signal, because it is synced along East Hartsdale, it will adapt to traffic along East Hartsdale, but at the same time, it'll adapt to live traffic along Central Avenue. We have discussed with DOT multiple times the benefits of the system. They have used this system on many roadways, including at train stations and other very heavily traveled roads, and it's been very effective. In terms of moving cars faster down East Hartsdale, our aim in retiming the signals and adjusting the traffic signals is not to make people go down the road faster. It's to make people travel down East Hartsdale, hitting as few red lights as possible, so that they're traveling at the speed limit at a pace that's safe for pedestrians, 25 miles per hour, so that you're not frustrating drivers who are going down East Hartsdale, so they speed. And also, I believe you had a question on Rockledge. So Rockledge today is two-way only at the section closest to East Hartsdale. That section is the only section that will be converted to one-way. The rest of the section today is currently one-way. When we did the traffic study, we've studied this intersection at least twice now. We've collected traffic counts at this intersection twice. There is a very low number of vehicles actually turning out of there right now. However, if you're trying to exit out, you're going to wait a long time because that traffic signal actually operates very poorly. So instead, our plan is to send people around Rockledge to the new northern traffic signal. And our analysis tells us that this intersection will operate much better, which means that you're going to wait less time to be able to exit there.
Can I just a follow-up, to your question? We could have a 25-mile-an-hour, speed limit, but sometimes people don't comply with the speed limits. And if basically you make it really easy for people to drive, and there's no obstructions or whatever, they could zoom, to Central Avenue or the Four Corners. Won't that increase, speeding, which is, when we had the hearing a couple of weeks ago, everybody said they basically wanted less speeding. They wanted, they wanted to make it more difficult to get through. On one hand, nobody wants to be inconvenienced, but at the same time, people are saying two things. They don't want to be inconvenienced, and they're saying they don't want speeding.
There's two elements to that.
You follow what I'm saying?
So the signal design, don't forget today, the signal spacing is not correct. So you have a long space between signals, which allows that speeding, and allows frustration, because as the signals are further apart, cars no longer travel as a pack. That's where you get speeding, and that's where people try to jump to beat the red. So the signal itself starts platooning those vehicles back to create this consistent movement. On top of that, don't forget, one of the things you do with speeds is you narrow the roadway. All these bulb outs at the intersections create a narrower roadway, which vehicles travel slowly. It's like the complete street concepts. The narrower the roadway, as a driver, you don't feel like you want to speed because your curb is now right next to you versus 8 feet off. So the combination of a signal that can slow down platoon traffic and just have a consistent speed, we're not just saying speeding, it's a consistent speed that avoids driver frustration, and these hardscape elements that narrow the road, that's why you can achieve that slower speed, even though the signals are better.
So, Mr. Samus, we thank you for your questions.
I haven't
I
finished,
believe we're
Gary.
going to have time to get back
Oh,
to
I
you.
see.
You've asked 7 questions. If you could pass the mic to the gentleman right behind you. And then we have a couple speakers on Zoom, and if we have time, we'll certainly get back.
Before we move
really-
on from that, one of the statements was that the fastest way to get people from Four Corners to the train station is have no traffic lights. I assume you disagree with that because of the traffic trying to come out of Wilson and Rockledge and Columbia.
It'll favor, if you have no traffic lights along East Hartsdale, pedestrians won't be able to cross. You won't be able to have people drive out of their houses on side roads, and it just wouldn't be overall good for the neighborhood. So I see your point there.
Okay, welcome, sir. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I wanted to, first off, thank the town officials and thank Barton and Akira for obviously the many years of hard work you guys have put in for this. Like, you know, it was referenced that this went back to 2019, so this has clearly been well thought out, so I greatly appreciate that. I just wanted to make 2 quick comments and ask 2 quick questions, hopefully. I just wanted to say, though, as far as Rockledge goes, I really like the change. I think that intersection, as someone pointed out, that pedestrian crossing there is quite long, going from Pretty Little Sweets across the way there. So I think that shortening it up is really nice, and I think that making it one way is very nice because I do see people wait for a long time at that light and then just kind of go through the red, or they speed down the street and they just get out onto East Hartsdale. So I think that will greatly help things, and that traffic light is atrocious. I mean, it's totally not synced up, so definitely can see that. I also love the bulb outs. I think that, everything that you guys said, it makes a lot of sense. Making it narrower slows people down, shortens the pedestrian crossing, so I love all those. And then 2 quick questions. So the first one is, I know down by the Mobile and Irish Bank, there's an elevated pedestrian crosswalk, so I was wondering if you guys considered that with any of your crossings, kind of to slow things down a little bit with like a speed bump / pedestrian crossing, make things a little bit safer. And then the second question is, I know that you said that the construction would start spring 2025, so just wondering if there was an expected end date, how long the construction would take. Thank you.
The different crosswalks, yes, we're considering everything right now, including the raised ones as well. It has to be vetted through, and a lot of it has to do with the comments and input we get from meetings like this. So that still is under consideration. As far as timeframe, we would expect the construction to take 2 seasons. More than likely, East could be done at the same time, but it could take 2 seasons. There's a lot of infrastructure work on West Hartsdale, and then also the timing of the signal equipment and supplies, and if we have supply chain issues still to that day, could have an impact on the schedule. So, although a savvy contractor may be able to get it done with a lot of forces in 1 year, which we hope they would do, it is possible it could be 2 seasons. So, keeping traffic flowing during peak hours is important, so there'll be limited time restrictions for work and lane closures as well, so they will have shortened work days. So, but that's a good question. And,
Thank you.
Okay, great. I know there's some speakers on Zoom.
Yeah.
And one of the speakers on Zoom put some comments in the chat, which I'm happy to read, but I think the person that raised their hand, if we could call on them next, that'd be
She's
great.
coming on.
Great.
Kathy, you have to say yes. You won't be on video because you're not turning on your video, but say yes to the prompt you're about to get. There we go. If you'd please unmute.
There we go.
There we go.
I'm Kathy Ursa. I'm a resident at 30 East Hartsdale, almost directly across from Wilson. And I have a serious concern about that, trying to just get across the street At that point, many people park in the municipal lot. People driving toward the Central Avenue intersection frequently gun their engine to just get to the light in time. And I was wondering what the plans were for a crossing signal for that area. Number one. Number two, I do like the idea of the previous speaker of raising the crosswalk, which would be a deterrent to speed, but in addition to a light that should be installed. That's my comment, and if someone would like to speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you for your comment.
Yes,
Questions?
thank you. So at that location at Wilson, obviously there's 3 lanes of traffic right now, and we've seen in our studies that people wishing to turn left onto Central Park Avenue, frequently go in the wrong direction or the wrong lane. So what we could do there is better delineate a crossing, a mid-block crossing, with those various types of alternatives that I showed earlier. One of those could be a raised crosswalk, acting as a quasi-speed bump, speed hump to slow vehicles down. In addition to signage and flashing lights, could be implemented there. But it's still under investigation. We haven't come up with a final alternative or anything like that yet. So your comment is well received and is taken under consideration.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate it. That's why I really wanted to be part of this panel. And I was wondering, even though the town is contributing a certain amount to make up for the total shortfall of this project, is there some amount of monies from the town that could be utilized at this time without waiting for the grant and all the due diligence that must happen, and actually start implementing some things such as perhaps the photo cameras, to do something as opposed to waiting till all the studies come together, because this the tragic accident notwithstanding, East Hartsdale is a treacherous place for pedestrians.
The camera, if we get the camera approved, that would not be part of the $5 million. That's totally, separate. And the town board yesterday at our meeting, we passed a resolution starting that process, asking for the legislation. My understanding, when you apply for a grant, if you get a $5 million grant and you spend the money sometimes before the grant is approved, you don't get credit for spending. That's true. Because I know on Babbitt Court, 20 years ago, there were people who lifted up their homes before they got the grant, and the federal government didn't give them any funding. So is that your understanding?
Yes, that is right. Absolutely, any of these changes cannot be made prior to the approval by the federal government and New York State DOT. But I actually did want to acknowledge Sergeant Ben Fontanellis for being here tonight, and he's been a part of this process throughout in lending his local expertise. But I would say we do receive comments routinely, and we evaluate them all. And, for instance, there's going to be an updated ADA parking space on East Hartsdale Avenue, which we're coordinating, which is outside of this project. So if there are items that can be done aside from this project, we're evaluating them.
And it also.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I didn't want it to pass, and I'm sorry for interrupting. The hard work of the board and leadership and all the work that goes into such a massive project, I want to acknowledge and express my appreciation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate that. It's not that it's taking a long time because the town doesn't have money to put into it. It's taking a long time because each one of these changes has to go back to the state to get their approval. We heard earlier that Central Avenue will get priority. That took an awful lot of convincing. I was at one of those meetings, at least one of those meetings, to get the state to agree to be integrated into the East Hartsdale. That takes time. It doesn't take money. It takes time for the engineers to see the wisdom of what's happening here. But once they are on board, then that's great. But then you make a change someplace else. You go back, you're smiling, you go back to get the state, and that just happens to be the process. It's designed to make sure that whatever ultimately built works and is the safest that it can possibly be. So that it's not, I don't want you to get the impression that we have, money issues that's holding this back. It's really design coming up with how do you possibly deal with the area around Decente Plaza. It would never be constructed that way if it wasn't like that already. But now we have to try and deal with it, and they're trying to do the best they can, and they're doing all kinds of analyses. I do want to clarify that there seems to be a misunderstanding. There is a match associated with this project. It's not a maximum of 20% from the town. That's a minimum of 20% from the town. The $5 million from the state is fixed. So anything that's over the 20% that we have to pay, that is our match, that number goes to 22, 23, 24. If we want the project done, the $5 million is fixed. So it's not, somebody doesn't know how to do the math. How do you get 20% of $5 million getting us to $7.3 million with the match? It's because that's what it's going to cost. And if we want to do that, we can have to come up with the money. We can try and find it from other sources, and we do look. But that's the math that's involved. And if there's anything incorrect with what I just said, please correct me.
That was perfect.
Thank you. What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Thank you very
Don't
much.
go overboard.
You're welcome. Anybody else in the audience?
I believe we have another speaker on the Zoom.
We do. But just a moment. Did you bring them up?
Yeah, is Carol on?
Yeah,
right
Carol's here, right.
now? If you could unmute,
There we go.
please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to say thank you for putting this presentation together, to all the professionals that were involved, and to the town board for coordinating this effort over the past few years. It was a really high quality presentation, and to be honest, most of my questions were already answered through it. I did want to say on the budget, as a taxpayer, I think this is a phenomenal opportunity to get $7 million of infrastructure investment done for the town to put up, I forget what the number was, 2.3 or whatever it is. You're getting $3 per dollar, and as a taxpayer, I would sign up for that every time. And I hope, if people do come and speak against, the spending on this, I hope they understand that this is really a large-scale infrastructure investment, and there's rare opportunities for the town to take on projects like this. Question for, I think, AKRF. This might not be something you know offhand, but I was wondering if you would be able to provide the pre versus post-implementation volume for the traffic on Rockledge Road after that gets changed to a one-way.
I don't have it with me, but that is in the report, so we could get you those volumes,
mic
but
on?
yeah. No? It's working? but I believe it was probably less than 50 vehicles during the peak hour that shifted, but we have the volumes in the report, so we could pull those later for you.
Okay, great. And I do think changing that to a one-way is much needed pedestrian safety improvement as someone that heads one way up there daily. And then lastly, a gentleman in the audience spoke earlier about the crosswalk near the Irish Bank. It connects to Santee Plaza to what's now a vacant building across from the Irish Bank. And I don't know that it's intentionally a raised crosswalk right now, but it's kind of like a ramp and a crosswalk. And I think he was wondering if that would be within the scope of this project. And I had the same question also.
No, it's not in the scope of the project exactly, but we're definitely going to take it under consideration and review that. We may be able to include something like that there. So thanks for the comment, Carol.
Thank you.
There were some comments that were put into the chat. I think it might make sense if I just read them. Alex K. did not raise their hand to speak, so I'm just going to quickly recite these. And then I do think, unless there's anyone else in the audience with an additional question, we should move on to West Hartsdale Avenue. So 3 comments. Aesthetically pleasing bollards are a great idea. Was going to bring that up. Protecting sidewalks from vehicles while allowing pedestrian access, particularly on the narrow sidewalk side. Second comment, speeding cameras are more effective than red light cameras, if possible, to discourage speeding. And then the last comment was, are speeding road bumps off the table? They are noisy for residences facing the avenue, especially when trucks go over them, which I think on that last comment, we had identified that we're going to evaluate if speed bumps make sense elsewhere in the corridor. So thank you for those comments. Let's see, time check. We are 8:24. Anyone else have any last comments before we switch over to West Hartsdale Avenue? Okay, so thanks everyone for your participation, and we're going to switch over to the West Hartsdale Avenue sidewalk.
That was a question, though. Are speeding road bumps off table?
It's possible they're talking about the, what they're called milled-in audible roadway delineators that run at the edge of the highway and then some roads the center lines. That is something that we'd have to discuss with New York State DOT. It is likely not going to be included, but I don't see a real reason for this, being a road engineer for this particular location. It's not, nothing's really off the table at this point, but it's doubtful that would be part of this project.
As I read the question, I think she wants it to be because they're noisy in a residential neighborhood. So I don't think she's encouraging it.
Okay, yes, that's good.
Although West Hartsdale Avenue and Central Avenue would require state approvals, East Hartsdale Avenue, anything we do, they don't have to approve anything.
So for this process, it's because it's federal funding, it's
Oh, I
almost
see.
as if it were a state road, so it's the same process.
Yeah.
That's why it
And
has
thanks,
to be treated
Councilman
like a
Sheehan. I read that as speed humps, but speed bumps, different thing, and in all likelihood off the table, but, okay, very good. All right, West Hartsdale Avenue sidewalk?
Sorry, bear with me just a second. Fast forward to the West Hartsdale side. So as a reminder, the West Hartsdale Avenue, our project limits from the Four Corners all the way up to Pat Capone. There is a small section of missing sidewalk between Pat Capone and the existing sidewalk right in front of the schools. Like, we would include that particular location as well. But basically, Pat Capone is kind of our location that everyone probably recognizes. So currently along the West Hartsdale corridor, sidewalks are somewhat narrow, 2 feet, 1 foot. They kind of vary, shoulders, excuse me. They vary in width in that particular part of the corridor. Travel lanes are pretty consistent, about 11 feet in width. There are locations of paved gutters that collect stormwater that seems to be running constantly. There's also areas where it's, it's just there only during larger storm events. Existing underneath the asphalt pavement is concrete. When the corridor was developed back in the 20s and 30s, they put in concrete slabs, and then over time, there's been asphalt overlays put at various points in time. This is a section of State Road, so State Route 100A. So New York State DOT has a lot of say in what happens on their roadways. So I guess we're keeping that in mind as we're going through with the design development. So as part of the studies that AKRF did and also the TAP application, they looked at a sidewalk, a continuous sidewalk along one side of the road to basically the cost for that infrastructure. In an ideal world, we could put sidewalk on both sides, but it's expensive. So one way to really address the issue is to have sidewalk on one side. And so we've looked at which side would be best for that, taking into consideration the right-of-way involvement. There's wetlands on the Westchester County Park property that's also a Section 4F property that has other implications if we get into impacting that. Positioning of utility poles, locations of the houses, how close are they to the road? If we put a sidewalk on one side and we have to push utility poles closer to someone's house, that's not something that's going to be received very well. So with that said, we came up with a side of the road that seemed best, that kind of balanced all of those factors. So as you're traveling from the Four Corners to Pat Capone, we've got the sidewalk right now positioned on the right-hand side of the road. So a 5-foot ADA compliant sidewalk, vertical faced curb to collect stormwater and also to provide some delineation for the vehicles traveling in that corridor. So right now there's a white stripe on that eastbound travel lane. So we would convert that from 11-foot travel lane, 2-foot shoulder, to a 13-foot wide curb lane. So it could accommodate bicyclists potentially that want to travel in that direction, but it also positioning of the curb will help give that visual barrier to the vehicle, the motorist, as they're traveling through the corridor, that there's something there. And
Yeah, when we say a wide curb lane there, that's the terminology that is used by Federal Highway Administration and New York State DOT. What it really means is a shared travel lane as well. So 11 and 2 for our math friends here is 13, and we're just going to be substituting the white line for the curb, which creates that barrier, but it also allows bicyclists a little bit more room in that lane, as they're technically not supposed to be on the sidewalk. So the space allocated is the same. It's just set up in a different way that can accommodate bicycles. And this is based on guidance. A number of years back, it was 12 feet. They've increased that width to 13 based on experience and room for bicyclists. So that's really the major change. We looked at sidewalk on both sides and weighing the property impacts, environmental, as Pete had said. It does the engineering does say that the right side going towards Pat Capone, it does make the most sense as far as impacts, costs, and timeline of getting the project through. Also, most of the residential neighborhoods that would feed the most, less people would have to cross the road if it was on that side of the road as well. So that's where some of that investigation has come from, and that's a big part. We've been working pretty hard over the last 3 or 4 months, weighing out all of the different reasons and justifications for putting the sidewalk on that side.
I think there's less homes also there on that side.
Yes, there's less homes on the other side, yes.
Yeah,
In
I
general, population density is more so on the side that they're referring to, so that was a positive. And I will say, when we represented the grant, with the knowledge I had at the time, I believed it made the most sense to be on the other side of the road and then switch over at Secor Road. and the benefit of having the professionals look at the variety of factors certainly swayed me to understand that what we're presenting tonight is certainly the best.
No, I bicycle on West Hartsdale Avenue a lot, and I think your recommendation makes like a lot of sense. And like you said, it really is great, you know, you have a whole residential area where they'll be able to leave their homes and just walk down, you know, down the street. I think you can get a lot more pedestrian use and bicycle, use.
Mm-hmm. Is that a delineated bike lane, and is it two-way? How does that work?
Unfortunately, it's not delineated. It's too narrow for that. You would need to have 5 feet, and then some kind of an offset as well. It's a shared lane. It's a shared lane. The terminology wide curb lane, New York State DOT came up with that. I disagree with the terminology, but so it's just really a shared lane. So that's how that works. There's a few areas where property is tight. So having the sidewalk on this side allows us also to shift the road slightly to, we'll call it the left if you're looking at the picture, to avoid property impacts. So we're working with DOT to move the road over a few feet, which would also give better sight distance around a couple of the curves that are out there too. So there's other benefits that come with it too. So it's a lot easier to move the road over 2 feet than try to acquire 3 more pieces of property. So those are all the things that the engineering really dictates, and that drives the decision here too.
Yeah. So that means tearing up the whole road and changing the pitch, location, and
Just in some locations,
Yeah.
correct. So part of this project is not to repave the entire road. New York State DOT does have it on their schedule at some point, and we're trying to coordinate with them to change that. They won't do it yet because it's it's a few years away, but to have that work done at the same time so that we can have a nice smooth surface on the road at the same time. It's really up to them, but we're going to work hard, and they usually do come around. I worked at Region 8 DOT 33 years ago, and it's a little easier to work out those things now schedule-wise. So. We're going to give it our best shot, and we're pretty sure we can make it happen.
So does this mean there will be a lot of bicycles at the train station, but you can't take them home because these are all eastbound? How do you go back home westbound?
Yeah, westbound would be to share the lane as they do today, and just that's part of the shoulder. I'm hoping that when the road is repaved, they also provide a better shoulder. We're going to also correct a lot of the drainage deficiencies that end up causing the potholes and cracks after just a few years of paving. So we've identified a number of those locations, and with that, it should be improved.
In addition to that, the drainage that we would encompass as part of this project with a new vertical face curb, or as what I have in the next slide, a concrete gutter. The New York State DOT has reached out to us, and they do have plans to fix a few areas as part of their own forces as a separate project to address some of these drainage areas that are problematic or that happen quite frequently, particularly around Beechwood is one that they plan to address. I believe before the season ends, that was their goal, to try to get something complete and in the ground to correct that particular issue. So not everything will be involved with our project. The DOT will have their own pieces to it, but whatever they don't have, we will address as part of this project.
Yeah, if you're speaking to the DOT and we could get things done, before the sidewalk. One of the problems that I have when I'm bicycling, and I was just bicycling up and down last week, is that the road is not even with the shoulder. So you could be on the road, and the shoulder could be maybe a little bit, maybe like a half an inch or a quarter of an inch, a little less. So if there's a car that's speeding, it's easy to fall off the bicycle because basically, if you start, turning the wheel, you're going to fall over. So I've complained for at least 5 years about that, And, if they just made it the shoulder even, it would be a great safety improvement.
Yeah, the word to use is edge drop-off. That's the terminology when you call next time that's what it's called. And they're concerned about that too. It's a major problem. Part of that, it has to do with the concrete that underlies, because you've got some uneven settlement there, because the area of the shoulder is not on concrete, where the main line of the road is. So you have a better foundation under the road than you do on the shoulder, so those drop-offs occur. So
Even like on the other side of the street where you're not doing a sidewalk, even if they could widen the shoulder, that would be a great improvement for bicyclists who want to go down. If they widen some of the shoulder
Yes.
without doing a sidewalk, then when people are going downhill from West Hartsdale Avenue, they might use the road, and then the pedestrians would use the bike path, I think.
Yeah, definitely to discuss that with them for having a 4-foot shoulder there would definitely be a big improvement. So it's, there just seems like there's room for it too as well. So it's a good discussion to have with DOT if you could do that, follow through. We just be able to document the shoulder in the report, but that's something best coming from the supervisor would be the best.
I will definitely reach out to them.
In locations where, as Tom mentioned, where we're shifting the road a little bit, as per this drawing, to the left, let's say, we would include shoulder widening, or a reconstruction of that shoulder, I should say, to take care of that issue that you mentioned of drop-off. But
Yeah,
it's not.
I've written to them like a bunch of times, but you said that they're aware of it also?
It's a very common problem statewide, and it's part of a safety program. Transportation Research Board in Washington, D.C. has studied edge drop-offs, and that is a primary cause of run-off-the-road accidents and such. So there is a insert they put in the asphalt pavers that help to reduce that as well. So it is a thing that is known and understood. So if you just keep mentioning it and pushing them with it, and hopefully you get some traction with it with them.
Sergeant, I remember there was one one motor vehicle accident on West Hartsdale Avenue, a couple of years ago. I think it was a fatality. But are you aware, have there been any like pedestrian or bicycle, accidents on West Hartsdale Avenue? I'm not aware of any, but.
I wouldn't be able to speak to it without actually looking at the accident crashes.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I don't think there were, but.
There are a lot, Hillcrest, where it enters West Hartsdale,
There have been.
historically, yes,
Would you be able to check that, the Hillcrest and West Hartsdale?
where there's no traffic light.
Yeah. You mean, yeah, that would be interesting. So thank you. That's a good point. Writing notes.
So I guess continuing on, another alternative that we have is concrete gutter that provides a permanent white delineation mark basically along the right-hand side of the road. And we would propose this particular treatment in locations where there aren't a lot of existing underground stormwater drainage systems. So as part of this project, we don't have an endless budget to do major trunk lines and underground stormwater infrastructure. So we would try to utilize what's out there, and above-ground conveyance would be a way to do that. We would contain our puddle spreads. Basically, with stormwater falls from the water falls from the sky, it lands on the pavement, and it collects and is concentrated in a certain location. So we would have it concentrated within the concrete gutter. And so it'll spread out, and we want to make sure that it's not spreading out into the travel lane and causing issues for vehicles. So this is a way to convey the stormwater to known locations that we already have based on our detailed survey. So we would try to collect the water and position it and get it to a point where it gets into the existing system. So this is another treatment option that we would have.
And this is kind of for spot locations where we've got to convey the water above ground. That slope in the gutter would be very closely match the road and could be utilized for bicycles too in the concrete area. So this is what you might see out there in just a few locations, really.
Is there any possibility, and I know there are two caveats, that at least to use of porous pavement, at least for the sidewalks? Is it durable enough, and is it going to be that much more expensive? Are the two caveats that I can think of offhand.
I think Tom can handle that one pretty well. He's very versed in the porous pavement. Things we have to consider obviously are grade, leaf litter, ease of constructability, but.
Yeah, I love porous pavement, so. Yeah, we actually wrote the state specifications for it at B&L, so, but in this particular case, I would say no, only because it'd be very difficult to handle the off-site contamination, the leaf litter, the lawn clippings, and a lot of the road dust. And the vacuuming would have to take place, probably at once a month here along something this close to the road. So also infiltration of the water into the ground. It would be a very small area, and it could undermine the road. I know the state probably wouldn't allow it because they're worried about more frost heave because it would be so close to the road. But the traction quality of porous asphalt when it's wet versus dry is greatly improved. So not particularly in this case I would recommend it, but it's a really good question, and I wish we could. So, yeah.
So I think continuing on, we just have a couple pictures of some of the issues that we've seen out there and kind of the constraints that we've had. So, I don't know, do you want to continue on with some of them, Tom?
Yeah, just at Beechwood Road, this is the area that the state has agreed to come out and do some mitigation for, to repair some of this before our project is enacted.
This was perfect. This is what I was talking about.
With the drop off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so that right there is just a thin overlay on top of the existing pavement where they did have that minor drop off. Yeah.
So in this particular location, as I'm sure the town board knows, that last year, right about where this car is, there was a seep in the road, and I think you went out and did some investigation to determine that it wasn't an actual water main break, and it was more of a stormwater related issue. And so that's the issue that I referenced earlier that DOT is aware of, and they're in the process of addressing right now. They asked us for our existing ground survey so that way they could do a design that addressed this particular issue. So these are just two examples of stormwater that's flowing above ground, and I think we have yet to get the design from DOT on exactly how they're going to address this, but the idea is that they're going to put that in place now, so that way when the sidewalk comes in, we're not ripping out infrastructure that's already been put down, so it's not a waste of money or something that's redone. So we're coordinating with them to make sure that there's no overlap of services.
Yeah, because I've been getting almost like weekly emails and calls from residents that the water, has been flowing, nonstop since I'd say last year, for at least a year. And a lot of residents are concerned that, especially when it freezes, that it's going to be dangerous. So that's something that and I've been writing to the state, and they said they're following up, but it's starting to get cold, and the water still is coming.
The clock is ticking on that, so yeah, hopefully they get out there soon. So
that's a really big safety issue.
One of the tight areas through here, the retaining wall, and at first glance we looked at possibly replacing that wall to allow room for the sidewalk on that side. And that's our first look, and we've been diligently looking at probably a dozen different ways to get around that and still provide what we need through here as far as sidewalk and satisfy the objectives. So we have a good plan that we think is going to work. We're diligently trying to make sure everything falls into place. That includes relocating some poles possibly, and working with Con Edison if we have to, just in a limited capacity. We're trying not to move anything, but this is one of the tight areas that we're spending a decent amount of time on trying to make sure we vet this properly. It's possibly the sidewalk could be 4 feet here instead of 5. That's okay. We've also cleared that with DOT. They will approve that. We did that yesterday. Made sure that they were okay with that before this meeting. We wanted to be able to tell you that. So sometimes you can have a sidewalk narrower than 5 feet. It's up to 250 feet. You can do that when certain constraints exhibit the challenge that it does here. So.
Is the 5 feet rule because of ADA?
Yes, but
So-
there.
So would the 4 feet still comply with ADA?
Yes, it would, for limited distances, and we've cleared that, and we're going to use the driveway opening there where it widens out to 5 for passing areas, and it fits well within the criteria, so it will still be compliant with the ADA guidelines. So I think the trade-off for that could be well worth it, and time and funds as well for construction.
Where do you pick up the extra 2 feet on that eastbound lane?
On the other side, and Yep.
So basically, from the face of this wall to about the edge of this utility pole, that would accommodate a 4-foot wide sidewalk, curb, 13-foot wide travel lane, 11 foot on the opposite side, and then 2-foot shoulder. So this pole here, and then the one up the road, we would look to relocate within the highway boundary. And still be able to maintain accesses to these driveways. Like Tom said, the alternative is removing this wall. We would replace it with a wall. It could be a precast modular block or, cast in place, but you're not going to have the same look and feel as you would with something like that than you have right now. And plus, there's the vegetation, that shields the house from the roadway. That would have to go. Plus, that wall is within the DOT right-of-way right now, yes.
And these are the reasons why you can use a 4-foot sidewalk through here for these constraints that Pete is talking about right now. So just part of the process, and this is how the federal process works. And this gets documented, it gets vetted, reviewed, and we'll have a number of different options here. We also have the option to go to a 12-foot lane too, if necessary there. So, go to the next one.
So moving up the road to the intersection with Maplewood, there's that existing boulevard grassed median area that is it would have a wide area or a wide length for pedestrians to cross once a sidewalk is there. The idea that we're coming up with right now is to potentially extend this curbed island out to act as a pedestrian refuge. So basically, people would cross from right here to a location in this in the middle of the intersection as a kind of a waiting point, and then continue across. So you're not completely exposed to vehicles for the full 75 feet.
That also reduces the speed at which they turn left into that road as well, just like we had on East Hartsdale. So there's a number of safety factors in traffic calming that just a small piece of an extension can really provide.
So another constrained area, as I'm sure people have seen, is the existing rock outcrop and embankment areas by, I think there's an existing church in this location. This is between the fire station and Secor Road. So in this particular location, we've looked into, what it would take to remove this rock outcrop. We hired a geotechnical engineer to go out and survey the rock, kind of assess the characteristics of it, what it would take to be removed, what the layback slope would need to be, and then that would help us determine how much right-of-way involvement would be needed in this particular location. It's extensive, and they're still in the process of completing the report, but they've given us some indications on what it would look like, and it would extend back into that slope. So one thing that we're looking at here is potentially shifting the roadway. So on this right-hand picture, shifting the roadway to the right a little bit to accommodate the sidewalk. There is right-of-way available on that side of the road that we could utilize, but this is one location that we're still in the process of hammering out some of the details. So I guess those were some of the constrained areas that jumped out to us. But I guess we want to open it up to some questions now. I know we're kind of running shorter on time, but we want to be able to at least field some questions if anyone has any on the West Hartsdale Avenue side. Yes.
Well, basic to my concerns are naturally is that what is the basis to say that there's a need for this sidewalk in the first place? I know it looks good on the map. I know it connects A to B and all that, but where are the pedestrians going to come from? Number one, Mr. Feiner, of course, is a very avid bicyclist. However, there are bicyclists in packs on Central Avenue on weekends. Does he expect he will be joined by similar packs of bicyclists going up the hill on West Hartsdale Avenue, or will he be the only bicycle rider that will be using this? That's one area of concern that I don't see that there is really, if this were a product, a market for this sidewalk.
If it's okay,
there
if
are
we could address
schools.
that, if it's okay if we could address it one question at a time?
Well, it's the same part of that
Okay,
question.
very good.
There are schools on this, but from West Hartsdale Avenue to the Woodlands School is quite a walk. So the students are all taking buses to go to Woodlands School, as well as the private schools on both sides of West Hartsdale Avenue. So I don't see that this is a sidewalk for the kids. So I'm really kind of wondering, who's going to use it?
Yeah, part of sorry.
Go ahead.
The project is part of the Transportation Alternatives Program, and that is to provide alternate means of transportation besides motorized vehicles. The sidewalk is there, would be put in for people to use it, and we expect people to use it. There's a lot of residential development through the corridor, and I don't think too many families would walk there on the shoulder with their young children, but now they will. And that's what the theme is. We're trying to promote the use of non-motorized vehicles to involve your transportation. The bicycles, 12 feet. We have 11-foot lane and a 2-foot shoulder. We're just taking that 13 feet and keeping 13 feet. There's no change. It just makes it a little bit clearer for the bicyclists to use and share the road. It allows the vehicles to move over without going out of their lane as well. So it's really a project to promote the use of alternate modes of transportation.
It was interesting, we did, before Senator Cousins gave us the grant, we did an online petition, and I believe we had 1,100 signatures from residents of the town asking for the sidewalk, and I think that persuaded the senator of the importance of this. We also met with, neighborhood leaders who advocated. I know that, over the years, there's a lot of people who mentioned that they would walk to Central Avenue. This could be really great for the Central Avenue, the business district, and East Hartsdale Avenue. You have 3 schools, Solomon Schechter, Woodlands, and Maria Regina, where students, during breaks could go to Hartsdale or Central Avenue. So if we want to revitalize the 4 corners and have mixed-use housing or whatever, I think that this is the type of improvement that could actually help revitalize the whole, four corners.
The concept being build a field and they will come. We're thinking forward rather than what is, but what can be. And I think statistics show, and I should defer to the experts, that a lot of young people are not driving as early. They're not rushing to get their licenses as we were. They'd rather take public transportation. They'd rather use other conveyances, whether it's bicycle or their own 2 feet. So
Very,
I think
very true.
lastly, I think you cannot underestimate the significant population density that is in feeder streets, and that's both multifamily and single family. So starting out in the corridor, there's more multifamily as you're near Four Corners, but if you think about Secor Road of 2030, my hope is that there's a sidewalk down Secor Road. If you connect Secor Road to this point, and we are implementing a pedestrian signalization at Secor Road and West Hartsdale Avenue, you now open this West Hartsdale Avenue sidewalk to hundreds and hundreds of residents, Poets Corners. And that's the Greenberg of 2030, 2040. We really have to think along these lines.
But Garrett, the population that you want to open up is not on the same side that the sidewalk is being built. And yes, there is a traffic light at Secor Road, but where else can you cross safely from one side of West Hartsdale Avenue to the other? Central Avenue, Secor Road. In between, where else do you have safe crossing? So all the population you're talking about from feeder roads is coming from the side of the West Hartsdale Avenue where there is not going to be a sidewalk built. Now, other things that come to mind are, town has a local law that property's frontage of a sidewalk therefore becomes the responsibility of the homeowner or property owner. Now, this truly is a state road. So I have a question here is, who will be responsible for plowing the snow, which you subject to fine, if this sidewalk is built?
It's the obligation of the property owner with frontage, consistent with many of the areas of the town.
So in other words, your claim is that the most homes fronting on this are on the side of the road where the sidewalk is to be built.
I indicated population density is favored on this side.
Okay, well, we'll see when that gets known by those homeowners, what their reaction would be. And in terms of this general philosophy of building a sidewalk where the people are and use, at the same time, on Central Avenue between Harvard Street or Harvard Avenue and Atchison Boulevard, on the east side of Central Avenue, there remains a 2-block stretch which is unsidewalked, despite bordering Webb Field, Presser Park, and the opposite side of the street is a shopping center. Where is the state involved in that? And where is the town involved in getting the state involved in completing that section? You know about this because I've talked about it with you for 2 years now. So there's a need, but for a very short piece of sidewalk. If you want a very even shorter piece of sidewalk that the town is directly involved in, when you leave here today, look at where the street is, Hillside Avenue, which has sidewalk on both sides, and a bus stop right by Town Hall. How do people get from those sidewalks to Town Hall? There is no sidewalk. Those pedestrians are expected to walk in the driveway of an active building. So when you tell me about your concern for pedestrian safety and where there is a need for a sidewalk, I could give you a much longer list than a street where you think potentially there will be pedestrian usage.
Appreciate the comments. Many needs throughout
I'm sure
the town.
you do.
No doubt that there's many needs throughout the town, and thank you. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Please raise your hand. Use the raise hand function.
Nobody
Okay.
on Zoom.
I think you did a really excellent job. I'm really very impressed, and I'm glad that we selected your firm.
Thank you very much. That was very informative.
Yeah, we're a team on a number of projects and work together. So thank you very much.
Any closing comments?
That was perfect.
I do have one closing comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I do have one closing comment. If anyone has questions following this presentation, please send an email to planning@greenbergny.com, and we will look to provide you with a response. But thank you for everyone who participated tonight. Appreciate it.